Welcome, my dear friends. It's marvelous, simply marvelous to see you. I'm Stephen Clements, a writer, a gamer, and an appreciator of big brain activities in general. On this channel, I perform dramatic story readings, I provide role-playing game and movie reviews, and I get to talk to interesting people. In this episode, we're going to explore the legendary Dungeons & Dragons module X1, The Isle of Dread. Written by RPG greats Tom Moldvay and David Zeb Cook, this is one of the most played modules in history because it was a pack-in module with 1981's D&D expert set. However, it has stayed alive in the RPG community because it's got the goods. Having run the Goodman Games Original Adventures Reincarnated edition of it, I can vouch for this thing. It is a good time. It remains one of the most celebrated and reviewed modules of history, and I will be recommending a few other reviews for it so you can get different perspectives on the material. One thing we all agree on, though, is that this is a dynamite module. Now let's see how it sells itself. The Isle of Dread, a wilderness adventure for character levels 3 through 7. The Isle of Dread is the first in a series of adventure modules for use with the Dungeons & Dragons expert rules. As the first D&D wilderness adventure published by TSR Hobbies, the Isle of Dread is designed as an instructional module to help novice dungeon masters design their own wilderness adventures. This module contains maps and background material for the Isle, 15 new monsters, and suggestions for further adventures. In addition, the Isle of Dread contains a map and background information for a large continent and 11 smaller maps for encounters on the island itself. In this module, players will push their way through dark jungles and treacherous swamps to discover the Lost Plateau and the final secrets of the Isle of Dread. At least 3 different editions of this module exist. The original featured a blue cover with art done by Jeff D. It's pretty cool, but I've always wondered why the arms on this giant lizard man look so hinky. A revised edition featured an orange cover with art by Tim Truman, and then we get the Goodman Games expanded version, which I will cover more after we talk about the original adventure's contents. The original module ran for 32 pages, and it packs an entire campaign's worth of material in bare bones, but open to interpretation and addition, locations, and encounters. A closer look at the page count reveals the rampant adventure opportunities are captured in only 18 pages of text, because we get 10 pages of maps, 2 pages of player handouts, and 2.5 pages of new monsters. The inside of the removable cover has 2 more pages of maps, and that makes sense. This is a module dedicated to exploration, which requires lots of maps. This review is based on the original blue cover version and the additional material added by the Goodman Games more recent edition, and I ran the Goodman Games 5th edition version of the module for 6 to 8 months. In the process, that helped turn me off of 5e, but the material they provided was excellent. As mentioned, the design credits belong to David Cook and Tom Moldvay. Both men designed important and excellent versions of D&D, with Moldvay making the second complete version of D&D Basic, and Cook responsible for D&D Expert and AD&D 2nd Edition, which is my personal favorite. Cook also designed the Planescape setting, which is arguably my favorite of all the settings. His list of RPG credits could take an hour to discuss on its own. But look at this. And this. And this. Are you getting the idea? And like many TSR luminaries, he wound up working with the Elder Scrolls series for a while, which might explain why its lore has such hook for pulling players in. Calling Tom Moldvay late and great is entirely appropriate. Moldvay was responsible for wildly imaginative and very pulpy modules such as Castle Amber, Secrets of the Slaver Stockade, The Lost City, and the infamous Palace of the Silver Princess. So he wrote 3 modules that were important enough for Goodman Games to make collector's editions of them. He wrote Boot Hill Products, Gangbusters, and for Star Frontiers. A writer for sci-fi fanzine Infinite Dreams while attending Kent State University, Tom was hired on by yet another RPG great, Lawrence Schick, then the head of design and development. That was a great move on Schick's part because basically every D&D product Moldvay touched became a classic. Sadly, Moldvay died young at age 58, so pour one out for our homie. As developer, we have Paul Reich III, who I hadn't heard of, but has some fine credits to his name. He grew up with Errol Otis, one of the early TSR greats who still churns out good stuff with a unique vision. And the two worked together at TSR, where he helped make Isle of Dread, 2 of the Slaver series, the Ghost Tower of Inverness, Gamma World's Legion of Gold, and apparently invented Dark Sun's Mantis Nightmare, the Thri-Kreen. While his RPG career was relatively short before he moved on to video game development, those are some quality belt notches. There were 6 editors, which I normally think of as a bad sign, but the quality of the module proves that it can in fact work. Layout was by a dear friend, Alan Hammock, so good on him. Listed as able assistance provided by Lawrence Schick of White Plume Mountain and Baldur's Gate 3 fame, along with Evan Robinson, who I've never heard of. Not a lot I could find on him, but he was involved somehow with 3 classic D&D and 1 top secret modules. For art, it's mostly cool and stylish. It might not be the best ever, but it is memorable and occasionally delightful or cringeworthy. Somehow, almost all of the iconic artists of early TSR show up in here, which normally could cause problems with clashing styles, but I think they played well together. And maps. Boy, does this thing have maps. Like I said, 10 pages of them inside and 2 more in the cover. The main map the players are to be given at the start of the adventure should immediately make modern gamers think of 5e's Tomb of Annihilation, for good reason. Tomb of Annihilation wasn't a very original product. Instead, it was basically a mashup of Isle of Dread and Tomb of Horrors, so remember that X1 did it first, and way less annoyingly, because there's no Death Curse BS here. You get maps not only for this specific module's use, but also the first fleshing out of the known world, which later became the Mystara campaign setting, which was awesome in basic D&D and completely flopped in 2E. 2 sample cave maps are included, with instructions to the DM on how to recycle these when you need a small dungeon and don't want to draw something up from scratch. That's good advice on how to run a game with less effort. The X in X1 stands for Expert, the tier of basic D&D that focuses on wilderness exploration. The game design philosophy goes that by level 4, your player characters have spent plenty of time in dungeons and controlled environments, locations with closely defined parameters of where you can go, which choices you have, and that was covered well enough by D&D Basic. So D&D Expert rules now say that the players and the DM have enough experience under their belt for that to broaden their horizons, to move out into an open world. They know the game well enough that it's now time to go play outside. And that's something the basic D&D editions did well. They matched character and player ability to the challenges appropriate to their levels and kept introducing new challenges as both players and characters leveled up and increased their skill set to keep things fresh. Something future editions of D&D stopped doing and 5th edition never bothered trying to do. The loss of this kind of playstyle variety and aspirations for characters and players to pursue is bad because the modern game is one-dimensional. Players never mature beyond stimulus response play. And Wizards of the Coast stopped putting out much material to teach new DMs how to do it well and how to do more with the game, which might help explain why there's a dearth of DMs. And that's as much as I feel I can say without getting into spoiler alert territory for X1. So here it is. Here's your warning that we're about to set sail and delve deep into the mysteries of the Isle of Dread. Most reviewers say, refer your DM to the video if you're a player because it will spoil your fun. I say DMs, dig in, and players, this is a wonderfully simple module to run your first game in. So come along and run this thing for your DM. It doesn't matter if your DM has played or read it before, because the Isle of Dread is almost infinitely replayable, depending on how you customize it. I've played in it and I've ran it and would love to go back for more, because it will be a different experience every time I do. We get no table of contents and jump right into the module introduction, which does a good job explaining what is here and how the DM can use it to best effect. This is a teaching module like the cover said, and also much like Keep on the Borderlands, and it's intended to show DMs how to run the wilderness adventures the D&D Expert rules taught them how to do. This adventure takes a lesson and shows you how to apply it, how to run different styles of adventures. And some important words of wisdom from the notes for the Dungeon Master section include these passages. The DM should be careful to give the player characters a reasonable chance for survival. The emphasis is on reasonable. Try to be impartial and fair, but give the party the benefit of the doubt in conditions of extreme danger. However, sometimes the players insist on taking unreasonable risks, charging a Tyrannosaurus barehanded, for example. If bravery turns to foolhardiness, the DM should make it clear that the characters will die unless the players act more intelligently. Everyone should cooperate to make the adventure as fun and exciting as possible. And when describing monster encounters, the DM should not rely only on sight. There are 4 other senses: smell, sound, taste, and feelings of hot, cold, wet, and so forth. The DM should try to vary his or her approach to encounters when possible. For example, the party may first hear the monster crashing through the underbrush, or find its tracks instead of just meeting the monster face to face. This is a good way to signal a party that an encounter may be too difficult for them to handle. The DM should also try to avoid letting unplanned wandering monsters disrupt the balance of the adventure. So in addition to more good advice besides that, we get 1.5 pages that literally form the world of Mystara through short paragraphs that paint thumbnails of evocative adventure locations and cultures using shorthand for their real-world analogs. For basic D&D, this is a good idea, because if a culture that existed in the real world is in the setting, that helps the DM and players understand what these nations are about without 30-plus page campaign guides. Sure, those came later, but only if you wanted to use them. Take these two, for example, and tell me if you don't already understand what's going on here and what the adventuring possibilities might be in these locations. Ethengar Khanate. The Ethengar are nomadic herders of horses, cattle, and goats. They are divided into small family clans. Usually the clans raid and quarrel with each other, but occasionally a strong leader, Khan, emerges to unite the entire Ethengar people into a strong nation. However, with the eventual death of the Khan, there is rarely an heir strong enough to hold the Ethengar together. They then break apart, and the family clans begin warring with each other once more. Their culture is similar to that of the horsemen of the Central Asian steppes, Huns, Mongols, Magyars, Turks, and so on. Then you get the Emirate of Ilarum. Ilarum is built in the midst of the largest oasis in the Alassian Desert. It is the center of caravan routes crossing from north to south and from east to west, and is controlled by the Emir of Ilarum and his royal family. The culture is similar to that of the Arabic desert states or the Central Asian city-states of Palmyra, Damascus, or Samarkand. So quick and easy, if you need more information about the nation, you've got some references that you can go check out, or maybe that you already know. And this is a way you can vicariously adventure through locations like that are familiar for sword and sorcery readers. Part 2 gives us the adventure setup, including an interesting but ham-fisted and improbable story hook. Background. Several weeks ago, the party of adventurers was returning from a previous adventure, the DM can work this into the campaign as desired, when they discovered a cache of scroll papers. The scroll paper was made of an excellent vellum parchment, a kind of paper that lasts for centuries. On the journey home, the characters are caught in a sudden rainstorm, and the entire cache was drenched. Upon the party's return to home, it was found that none of them were magical. Still, magic users can always use good paper for spell research and writing their spell books, so the characters carefully spread the paper out in front of a fire to dry out. Much to their surprise, as the paper dried out, writing appeared on several of the pages. The heat had brought out secret writing on the parchment. And that's pretty unrealistic that your players would actually do that, but sometimes it's okay to say, this is what your characters did, and bam, now we have an adventure. It's fine. It's called setup. It gets you to where you need to go for the players to then make interesting choices in exciting environments and maybe kill exotic monsters. And then we have several paragraphs that basically summarize it for you. We have a long dead captain that found an island full of danger, mystery, and promises of hidden wealth, the Isle of Dread. And he gives us directions on how to get there, which prompts, well, how do we get there? It's an island. We're probably on land and there's a lot of water between here and there. So we get several options pointing out how the party can do that. The key part is getting a boat, including ideas for brutal debt collection practices some moneylenders without access to U.S. aid might use. There are directions on using random encounters and weather events for the trip, which are intentionally forgiving because the designers want the party to have an exciting voyage, but they want them to get to the island. And the different wandering monster tables hold some interesting stuff, including new monsters. And this module has some interesting stuff we'll go ahead and talk about both on the way there and on the island itself. We get a variety of dinosaurs to pick from. We get magic using intelligent spiders with grubby little hands. We get giant mammals like the giant elk, the megatherium, or giant ground sloth, which that adorable creature met a horrible end in my campaign. So some pretty neat additions to your table. And once you make landfall in the intended starting zone, the further north you go, the more dangerous the locations and encounters become. And remember this because it's a fun fact that'll come up later when I talk about when I ran it. So that intended starting zone is a safe-ish spot on a small peninsula in the southeast part of the island and home to the human societies Moldvay and Cook describe. First, we get Tanaroa, the biggest village on the island, although that isn't saying much. There's only 2,100 people scattered across 7 villages. And all 7 villages are run by women, which explains a lot, like maybe why it's called the Isle of Dread. Each village is populated by 4 different tribes headed by men and named for animal totems. Each tribe will have its own quarter of the town and its own graveyard, since the dead are important in native society. mostly because they're still walking among the living. You see, each village also has a heartwarming, welcoming official who makes sure everyone remains uninterred after life, the Zombie Master. The last important village official and advisor is the village Zombie Master, or Zombie Mistress. This advisor will be a cleric or magic user of at least 5th level who heads the cult of the walking dead in the village. Yeah, because that's what every village needs. This cult is a secret society whose members, except for the Zombie Master, wear hooded masks during cult ceremonies. At these ceremonies, the walking ancestors, the same as the monster zombie, are created. While these zombies are sometimes used as laborers or spare warriors, the villagers shun and fear them. And the natives are a bunch of pansies, because I guess all the brave ones have been killed off over the years and only the cowards survived behind this big wall that's protecting them from the dangers on the rest of the island. And before you say I'm knocking the natives, rule number 1 for humanity is to survive. But I'm mostly old Scottish by blood, so I spit on them for living like cowards instead of dying like men. And Celts have a long history of picking fights with obviously superior enemies, so I come by this attitude honestly. Seriously, the write-up of these people in the book, they're a bunch of cowards that don't really want to do anything for you, and they won't go very far into the island. And they've got plenty to cower from. We get a great sampling of the kinds of encounters you would want from a wild, untamed island full of dangerous critters and the unknown. Then we get to the scripted encounter area descriptions for the rest of the island, which are plentiful and evocative. Each area receives only a few lines, but it is enough to spend at least half a session of game time in each when you add a little bit to the stew pot, but they could go on for even more if the DM desires. There's no overarching plotline in the module, although Moldvay and Cook give several ideas of the stories you could make using it. The party could be here to open trade routes to the island, and they offer suggestions for the money and XP the party might net. They could be here to conquer the island for themselves, because why not? That's something people do. The party could have been sent here to destroy pirates lairing around the island on behalf of a merchant company or nation. They could be here for the simple reason that this is an unexplored land, and explorers gain fame and glory, if they live, that is. Just offshore from the big beautiful wall keeping all the violent, man-eating, murdering undesirables out, there's sharks lurking and sea snakes guarding a pearl bed. To the north, a rock baboon fortress isn't far away, and off the western shores there's half a page dedicated to a pirate island, which could easily be worked into one or multiple adventures by the DM. They could be the big bads the players are here to take out and end their slaving operations, the villains of the week, or maybe the party is a bunch of bad dudes looking to press a bunch of bad boys into their service. You got options. Elsewhere, there are several animalistic but intelligent races that first appear in this module. We get their settlements, what they're like, and how they're likely to receive the party. The Rakasta are warlike cat people the party might be able to befriend, and obviously they should, because these derpy bad boys ride saber-toothed tigers into battle. You know, we all want to ride saber-toothed tigers into battle. Step 1 to making that dream come true is buddying up with somebody who can make that happen. I say derpy because these guys get the worst art in the module and in at least 2 editions of it. Just look at them. This is sad. So those flying squirrel raccoon people, Vanaton, they sound absolutely adorable. And as the most benevolent group north of the wall, also the most likely to be nice to the party. They're also the most likely to fit in my backpack to enjoy my lifelong involuntary friendship. For players with arachnophobia, how about those evil, brainy spider wizards with the little hands who can cast charm spells and make you give their bulbous noggin a kiss? Because Moldvay gave us those and called them the Aranea. Now don't be impressed by the name. That's just Spanish or Portuguese for spider. He didn't come up with something new. There's amoral lizardmen who like to eat people now and then as a little treat, and Neanderthals who are the people that get served on the buffet. There's dinosaurs lit on grass that act like meth, dragons, and lots of treasure to make it all worth it. Seriously, the place is lethal, but at least it pays well. Throughout the module, the locations and encounters are detailed enough to run as is, or for the DM to add a little flavor text or plot line to make them adventures of their own. For all these new races and their settlements, the module gives us only one example of each, but does not say this is all there is. There could be many Neanderthal villages on the island, which the DM could expand on to set up a hot war between them and the lizardmen that try to eat them. Perhaps some Neanderthals like to eat them right back, and the PCs have to decide whether they want to be peacemakers, side with one side to take down the other, or eradicate both for committing the horrible crime of eating sentient beings. If the island as presented in Part 2 lacks a built-in plot, Parts 3 and 4 provide one centered around cannibals terrorizing a small village and needing to be dealt with. The cannibal lair is in the ruins of a temple to a long-forgotten deity or race, and there's no real telling what it was for, so the mystery is as impenetrable as the DM wants it to be. While the dungeon inside is creative and lethal, there is enough information there to equip a DM who wants to build a larger story with enough material to not have to do much work. So part 3, the Central Plateau, gives us another wilderness area to explore that's quite a bit different than the humid tropics below, being cooler and more arid. Bordered by mountains on one side and the Great River Canyon on the other is the Central Plateau. It stands separated from all else by steep, jagged cliffs that rise 3,000 feet. There are only 3 ways to reach the top of the plateau: by crossing the rope bridge, by using a magical flying device, or by climbing. Characters without climbing skill cannot successfully scale the cliff, and even thieves must check for falling every 100 feet. Or 30 times? Good God. The characters should be given hints about the great risk involved in climbing. And we get more giant mammals, but only flying dinosaurs at this elevation. And while there are fewer pre-made encounters, they have a wider variety of things to do. There's a promising gold vein that will make players yearn for the mines, even if it's kind of a tease that will require a ton of work to extract and refine. But Cook provides ideas on how that could work logistically, which is neat, with options ranging from shipping in skilled laborers to enslaving the natives for forced labor. Turns out the natives are as bad at real work as they are at being good soldiers. But if a player wants to live out their fantasy of wearing a white suit while drinking a mint julep and bossing around, then this is their time to shine. There's paranoid treants that don't suffer shenanigans in their woods, and there's more to see the higher you climb. The cliffs surrounding the central volcanic lake form a high, imposing wall of upthrust rock. Often shrouded in low clouds, the tops appear jagged and in some places snow-capped. There are no clear trails over the cliff wall, but it appears that the wall can be scaled in many places. Even characters without climbing skill may attempt to climb, as there are obvious handholds and routes up the rock face. At the top, the rocks are covered with ice and snow, and the temperature is below freezing. No encounters will occur here, but characters who attempt to stay here overnight without warm clothing will suffer 2 to 12 points of damage from exposure. If the party has brought firewood, they can start a fire to keep warm, but there is none to be found here. As the party descends into the volcanic crater, an 8-hour climb, the temperature will become warm and near tropical. Jungle vegetation covers the lower slopes, but the valley is sparsely populated with animal life. No normal encounters of importance will occur, but on a roll of 12 on 2d6, a minor tremor will shake the ground. And there is a small village that lies on the shore of the large crater lake, and this is the village of normal natives that's being attacked by cannibals. It's a pretty sad little place. Its landward side is surrounded by a crude palisade of palm trunks and branches that extend into the water on both sides of the village. There's only about 50 people here who live by fishing and farming small gardens, and they're broke. And they're led by Fano, the talking chief, who is the interpreter for a stone idol that everybody considers a chief, but who doesn't actually say anything. But Fano swears he hears what he's on about, and that's what decides village policy. Kind of seeing how they wouldn't be able to handle cannibals on their own. This is their leadership. And the second most important village is Umlat, the tribal cleric, and he's actually a pretty cool dude, but he's really old and doesn't move around very fast. I like that Umlat is available for basic cleric spells and functions that the party may need, but he can't accompany the party into the dungeon in the central island for health reasons. So the party does have help close by, but they can't rely on him to bail him out in the thick of things. This is another form of resource management that players will need to think through to effectively use. Now, Part 4, Taboo Island, is just shy of 4 pages, and this is where the cannibals are at, in the middle of the crater lake. In just those 4 pages, Cook gives us a classic dungeon and a new monster that clearly captured the imagination of generations of gamers, which strike me as strange because they read to me like an easily overlooked afterthought, but I'm here for it. In the Cannibals' ruined temple, environment is king, such as at the temple entrance that has been carved into the side of a rocky cliff, and 2 primitive docks of narrow poles and weak planking extend from the temple steps, with canoes moored alongside it. And those steps lead to a landing lined with pillars, obviously far more sophisticated than the cannibals living here could have made. And the landing and pillars are made of red marble, which is interesting. It's set on poles thrust into cracks in the floor of the landing are many shrunken heads, jawbones, feathered totems, and other primitive tribal symbols. Inside we have a guard post which is set up at a choke point, leading into a large hall that was once the main worship area of the temple, that's now being used as the central living area of the tribe. The place probably stinks to high heck, and the floor is covered with mats, bowls, and eating utensils made of bone. There's a blazing fire in the center of the chamber. Now the hall itself is 2 stories high with balconies on 3 sides. Now there's an opening in the center, but it's been closed off with netting to prevent bats and other creatures from getting in and attacking the cannibals. In the center of the wall opposite the entrance is carved a face that fills the area from the floor to the ceiling. It looks like a human or humanoid creature with its mouth agape. The carving has been cut and defaced, making the kind of creature it was difficult to identify. There's a village chief who's actually quite a badass, and he's got his own witch doctor, like the evil version of Umlat. And they've got captive women, feral sons, unmarried men, and quite a bit of gems, actually. Now, there's a private altar room that contains several items once used by the priests in worship of their gods. For across from the door is a square stone pedestal. Next to it are several bone rhythm sticks, 3 inlaid and bejeweled bowls, a crumbling bamboo flute, and the remains of a feather fan. More importantly, on the pedestal is a small, intricately carved stone box with 2 hinged doors. And inside is an unusual statuette of golden coral. It looks like an amphibious humanoid with a smooth head, large eyes, and a tentacled sphinctered mouth. The torso is human-like, with 2 arms that end in webbed, clawed hands. From the waist down, the body divides into 3 long tentacles, ending in flute-like fins, each tipped with a single large claw, the kopru that live in the mud beneath the temple. All who look at this statue must make a saving throw versus spells, with a failure meaning the character becomes a secret servant of the kopru until the power of the statuette is destroyed. And it can be destroyed either physically or by being blessed by a lawful cleric or a cleric of a god of good. And there's fallen rocks, hidden doors, parts of the floor that'll fall through, and other means to get you down to the 2nd level, which is partially underwater, such as a former torture chamber. That character's shorter than 4 foot tall and wearing metal armor. Well, they're going to have to figure something out or else they're going to drown. And the place is filled with reddish-black rot and supporting beams that are about to collapse at any time. There's cavefish that have somehow made it in here, along with other aquatic creatures. And depending on the edition, you might get different ones, such as sharks, crocodiles, piranhas, spitting cobras, and of course, a giant oyster, with a big old black pearl in it worth 3,000 gold. There's waterlogged rooms full of statues of graceful creatures, women with children, and other fierce monsters. Rooms that can flood if a hidden trigger is tripped, either crushing the characters with the water pressure or possibly drowning them. And of course, what's a dungeon without a rat lair with hidden goodies and a fire trap? And I like this one because it's a degraded fire trap. So before the place was flooded, flaming oil would shoot out of the trap, catch fire, and so it would just be fire in the air that you might be able to avoid. But since this room is flooded and the trap is degraded, now oil comes out, still ignites. Now you have burning oil on the water everywhere. So it's even worse. So you can drown and burn to death in the same room. There's a well filled with boiling water. That is one of the ways down to the 3rd level, but you're probably going to die if you go that way. But there is another way that you can survive to get down to this mud pit. And I question why you would even go down to this 3rd mud layer, because it's full of death, mental domination, and not a whole lot of treasure. I mean, yeah, there's some good stuff if you find it down here, really potent magic items, but the risks are high. So I talked about a mud level. Well, what we got is a single natural cavern of great size where the air is hot, steamy, and foul with volcanic gases. The floor of the cavern is a field of bubbling mud pits, small geysers, hot springs, and mineral crusts. The colors are rich reds, browns, and yellows combined with blacks and grays. Terraces crusted with deposits from mineral springs extend from the sides of the cavern at several points. Stalactites hang from the ceiling and merge with stalagmites in several places to form pillars from the roof to the floor. The heat of the chamber will prevent the use of infravision. And occasional flares of ruddy light, combined with great bursts of steam from the depths of some hot springs, will briefly illuminate small points in the room. So it looks like it's miserable, and it is. It gets worse. You can fall through this stuff and die by drowning, heat exposure, gas exposure, and then there's a kopru who will try to mentally dominate you into being one of their eternal servants. And the module wraps up with adventure ideas that can flesh out your Isle of Dread experience, and they're good. a few of which I used myself. Speaking of when I ran this, I did so using the Goodman Games Original Adventures Reincarnated Edition and some of the original material that they made just for it. Besides containing reprints of older editions of the module, the book includes some mildly interesting essays and interviews with people that were associated with making the original and the revised versions. And I say mildly interesting because for as good a game designer as Zeb Cook is, he's not an exciting speaker. I saw him give a lecture at TotalCon in 2023, and while it was worth my time, he seems to downplay the importance of his work so hard that it tamps down on the enthusiasm of his audience, myself included. So yes, he'll tell you some stories, and he's undoubtedly one of the best RPG designers that's ever done it, but his humility appears to rob him of the appreciation you would hope he has for his work, which if he had would make him dig really deep for interesting anecdotes and how he felt about writing a given piece. He's not self-deprecating, but he's not impressed with his work. And he gave us classics, which we love, and it feels weird to not get some sort of similar enthusiasm out of the guy who made it. For the 5th edition adaptation Goodman gives us, we get a lot of great material added to the Isle. By a lot of material, I mean 230 pages of 5e material. I repeat that again, 230 pages. The entire original module was 32. It expands on everything. Bigger monster descriptions, more monsters, more random tables, more art, more maps, side quests, new NPCs. And shout out to my man Pratis the Druid. It provides bang for the buck. And the retail price, it might be high, but it's a bargain for the amount of material that you get. We get weresharks, demons, encounter building advice, new dungeons, so much stuff, it would take at least another hour video to step you through it. They tack on 25 new pages to the Taboo Island material, which is good. There's 26 new encounter areas. I enjoyed their version of Keep on the Borderlands, but I love their version of Island of Dread, with a few caveats. For the appendices, why are the stat blocks for the new monsters and the named NPCs separated by a magic items section? When I'm in a fight involving new monsters and some of the NPCs, I don't have to flip back and forth over that many pages. If the sections are right next to each other, that's way more convenient. But the map, 1,000 curses on whoever numbered this map. Rather than make a new map, numbering locations new and old in the order they might be encountered, Goodman kept the numbered locations from the original map and just added the new location numbers next to them. See the one down there? It's next to location 25, the text for which are 25 pages apart. You have to pass location 34 before you can get to 5 or 9. It was a bad decision. It's a new module. Make a map that fits the module you made. This poor design decision made flipping back and forth between adjacent encounter areas a nightmare. The new art was generally good, but the poor Rakasta still can't catch a break and looks hinky. The new locations went hard, building up the Kopru as an ancient threat trying to reemerge. Like with many campaigns I run, it started because I got into another DM's campaign and they were all excited about running a pirate-themed campaign, so it was going to be nautical with ships, and we all designed characters to go with that. He noped out of DM duties after one session, but we still liked our characters and wanted to do something with it, so I took up the banner. So I ran for us a few pickup games from Isle of Dread at a local con, and we had a good time, so we kept at it for over 6 months. We used 5e rules and rolled for the voyage outcome of our trip to the Isle of Dread, and we rolled about as bad as possible. We got shipwrecked, and then I had us roll for which part of the island we shipwrecked onto, and we almost rolled the absolute worst possible option, almost all the way to the north of the island, which is the most deadly. Now, we're level 1 characters, mind you, and we rolled for how much of our equipment and supplies survived onto the beach, and it was almost none. I didn't even have my armor. I had a sword and my shield, and as level 1 PCs with maybe a shield and maybe one weapon and almost no food, even with 5E's easy mode, we ran a lot. So the party consisted of a Topaz Dragonborn who convinced me that 5E makes it impossible to challenge players past a certain point, a human fighter, a gnome druid newbie who got into D&D due to Critical Role, a Furbolg cleric of Sylvanas, played by the original DM, and me playing Brother Ralbert, a blonde eldritch knight, part of a holy order dedicated to Denir, god of writing. In my game, I made every village cram all their graveyards together into a central mound in the village, big enough to loom over everybody, And I combined the zombie master role with the female village elders and made every village ruled by a female zombie master who ran the town because she commanded the undead. And necromancers are scary. Shit was interesting. After landing, we looked for safety, stared down lizardmen who respected that we had the balls to stare them down and not back up, and who told us about the humans on the south of the island that we might want to go hook up with. So we carved out a boat and we rowed. Since the campaign went on for such a long time, I'm not going to attempt to do an ins and outs overall arc description of what happened in it to you, because it would take way too long. But there are a few examples I can give that both show that we were having a good time and that I adapted the expectations of your typical 5e game to incorporate the flavors found on the Isle of Dread. And speaking of the flavors, we'll start with Brother Ralbert because he had a high charisma and good-looking guy. As mentioned, he was an Eldritch Knight that I had made for the pirate campaign, and so I kept him around as a DMPC to give us more ass and be able to survive the challenges of the island. Plus, he was the only arcane spellcaster we had, which could come in handy. So in the player's handbook, Eldritch Knights, upon reaching 3rd level, gain access to spells of the Alteration and Evocation schools. And I had that in mind for the kind of traditions at the monastic order of Eldritch Knights that he was part of at the Temple of Denier, which was a giant library back on the mainland, in the equivalent of Fantasy World Scotland. That's the kind of training he would get from the masters there. However, he's not up in Fantasy Scotland. He is not at the library. He is on the fucking Isle of Dread, where the only arcane spellcasters that I could find were necromancers. And that's accounting for both hostile NPC spellcasters and friendly NPC spellcasters. Necromancers, specifically the zombie masters who, as I mentioned, were all women in my game. So upon reaching 3rd level, he knew he was expected to learn the arcane arts, but didn't have a teacher to give him what he was expecting to get. And so instead he sought apprenticeship with the zombie master of Tanaroa, who was a creep. And though he was lawful good, he felt that this is the path he needed to take to learn necromancy because that's the life path that Denier had laid out for him. Who is he to question fate? So instead of alteration and evocation, he got alteration and necromancy. Naturally, for a lawful good knight, this created a lot of moral conundrums for him and gave me plenty of role-playing opportunities that I was able to hook the other characters in on because they had opinions as well. So it was a good plot device. And it integrated a character, and so the entire party, into the social structure of the 7 villages because each one of them has a zombie master. And eventually we met a village zombie master who used only white necromancy, so the good kind, like the curative, not the zombie animating, necrotic energy blasting kind. He and her had some conversations as the roles had it. Eventually they fell in love and got married. And then there was a zombie master civil war in the 7 villages, which I had the party just do a few simple rolls to see how that turned out. And we friggin' exterminated the evil necromancers from the 7 villages and brought in a new era of more enlightened rule by those who used necromancy only for good. Like Ralbert gave up the dark necromantic powers he had learned. And so it was an interesting character arc. He went from struggling with the uncertainty of what to do, but the expectations put upon him as an Eldritch Knight to learn arcane sorcery, to having the moral misgivings of what he was learning and what he could do with it, and the toll it was going to take on his soul to use these powers, to finding a better way and being part of the team that redeemed all the human civilization on the island from the blight of evil necromancers. And so the beloved relatives that were zombies were eventually all laid to rest to find their eternal peace after that civil war was concluded. So that was fun. Now the Rakasta, I mentioned there being some settlements of the Rakasta on the island, and in the Goodman Games edition, they give you the option of having some encounters where you run into one Rakasta group that's involved in a conflict with other Rakasta groups, and they can try to convince the party to join their side in the conflict. Just north of the tar pits, we did run into such a group, and I rolled to see how many of these Rakasta there were. Oh, 2. Only 2 of this faction had survived the conflict so far. Well, they gave us a good pitch about how if we helped them take out the bigger faction, then they would open up trade with Tanaroa and make things better overall. Well, that did not go very well because when we got to the tar pit, we rolled a random encounter. Which one did we roll? Oh, shit, the red dragon. Now, one thing you can do with a random encounter is do something other than have the monster directly attack the PCs right off the bat. You can have them menace the area, give your PCs a chance to run, or take other actions. In this case, the red dragon decided to be playful, strafed the tar pit, breathing fire on it, and I rolled to see what that would do. Well, it turned out it caused an explosion. And so the tar pit caught fire, and all the tar and the dirt in the pit instantly solidified into meteors that flew up into the sky and then landed up to hundreds of yards away from the tar pit. Well, I had us all make saving throws to see if we got hit by any of the shrapnel. Those two Rakasta? No. They both got crushed. Each one of them got crushed by a different falling hardened tar ball. So our part in their civil war was over before it really began. The human fighter got wrecked, and then we had to cart his dead ass miles back across the lethal jungle to Tangaroa. And then I had to figure out how to get this guy resurrected because none of the zombie masters are high enough level to cast a raise dead spell. Well, that's when I had Prattis the druid show up, and he happened to be able to do some juju and got our boy back. But we certainly did not escape the red dragon unscathed. We did break up into several different directions to run away to give somebody an opportunity to survive the dragon coming after us, and I rolled that he came after Ralbert and the gnome. Well, he breathed his fire. Fortunately, the gnome and I both made our saving throws, so we eked out just a few hit points after taking half the damage, but it's a red dragon's breath. That's going to destroy whatever flammable stuff you had on you. Now remember, we didn't have much equipment to begin with because we lost it in the shipwreck. But Ralbert did have that long, beautiful blonde hair and eyebrows, might I add. You don't know how much you miss your eyebrows until they've been burned off by a red dragon. And so now, freshly denuded of all body hair and clothing, it was in that condition and in that wounded level that we had to cart Homeboy's dead ass back to Tangaroa. Just thought that little bit of extra detail would help put in your mind what difficulty setting we were playing Isle of Dread. Now, one of the 7 villages I decided had been abandoned, or rather overcome by undead, and this was based on some of the Goodman Games material. There's no living people left in this village, just the undead. We cleared out the undead and we made it into the former zombie master's lair where she had become a shadow. And she got BTFO'd really quick. That fight was over way too fast. But in and amongst her effects, we found where she had been in contact with some dead god and was trying to bring him back and yada yada. And there was this, organ pit she had made. Yes, a pit full of organs from living and dead things. If they were living, they were dead after she took the organs out of them as a sacrificial offering to this dead god to try to bring it back. Well, since Ralbert was intended to be kind of the expendable one, and I would send him in first to check for traps, since we didn't have any thieves, went in to investigate to see if there's anything in there because we heard some strange noises coming out of it. And the furbog decided to come in as well. Well, it was disgusting. It was awful. No sane person would ever do this, but then again, we were adventurers on the Isle of Dread. We weren't really sane at this point. And we heard something speaking in a muffled tone from beneath some of the rotten organs. Now, mind you, these are organs rotting in the heat of a tropical island. So keep that in mind as well. So I poked into the organ mass and pulled up this face that was talking to us, and it projectile vomited all kinds of awful stuff right at us. So we made our saving throws. I passed, the furbog didn't. And so he got infected with some awful thing that later turned out to be the vestigial essence of that dead god that the zombie master had been in touch with. And eventually it possessed him and took him over. Now, there was an opportunity to get him purged of this. It was beyond the zombie master's power. It was beyond Prattis the druid's power. But Prattis did tell us if we went to the north of the island, there was a power source there that we'd be able to do it. However, Homeboy failed his checks, dropped out of the game before we could get up there. Now, what was up there that was the source of this power? Also going with some of the Goodman Games material, there is a pretty awesome dungeon involving a mummified Rakasta. I decided he was a guardian of a shrine that whoever could defeat him would be the only one worthy to serve under the power of the Kirin that is the spirit guardian of the island. And it's that Kirin that could have purged Homeboy of that dead god's essence. And when we made it in there, the Topaz Dragonborn Ranger did his fly, flit with the arrows. And this is where I had to make crap up just to make the fight interesting. Not to make it to where he was actually going to lose, but to make it even halfway entertaining, because 5e at the levels we had gotten to, around 7th level, really breaks down if enemies don't have certain features where they could challenge a flying PC who can just flit around and can't be harmed by a ground-bound enemy. And how much fun is it watching a PC fly around effortlessly while just pincushioning a major opponent? Well, it's not really. He did defeat it by the skin of his teeth, and then was found worthy of being the servant of the Kirin. And that's when the campaign ended, because the gnome had dropped out, the furball had dropped out, and it felt like we had enough game in us to say that we did the Isle of Dread. And while the module itself does not speak to survival or resource management style gaming, my system for navigating, foraging, and keeping a lookout, called Overwatch, was inspired by running this. Now, one thing that was also very important on the island, in addition to, was weather. And so every 8 hours in a day, I would have one of the players roll to see what the weather was doing using a D10. If they rolled a 1, it was as placid as could be. Clear skies, no problems, no complications. If it was a 10, we're talking torrential downpours, hurricanes. You better hide yourself in a cave, or else you're probably going to get thrown off the island by gale force winds. Or you could get hit with mudslides, rock falls, all kinds of disasters. So this is one of those cases where having divination powers to determine what the weather's going to be, or skills that could help you divine that, added a strategic depth to the gameplay experience. And in a hex crawl, it went very well. Because sometimes we knew the weather was going to be bad. It was better for us just to hunker down at the best camping spot we could find and try to weather the storm. And it didn't get boring, because it added an element of realism to the game. It helped us with our immersion. And that weather turned out really awesome one time, because we encountered a baby giant horse rhino who was stuck in a problem, was looking for its mama, and that's what we needed to get the baby out of the problem. So we fanned out, we searched for the mama miles away. Ralbert and the Topaz Dragonborn found the mama, were able to talk to it to let it know that we're trying to help it save its baby. But by this time, it was nighttime and we were miles away. Now, fortunately, we had just dead reckoned north on a beach until we found her, but she was highly motivated to get back there as soon as possible. Well, she could move faster than we could. So we asked if it'd be okay for us to ride her, and she said, absolutely right you are. You're going to take me back to my baby. We're going to save that little thing. And I said, you know what? We need to see what the weather's like as we do this, because it's going to take a couple hours to get back. We rolled high enough to where it was spicy, but not so high that we were going to die from being out in the elements. So me and that player now have the memory of riding a giant long neck horse rhino down the beach while lightning flashes in the night sky and the whipping winds beat us with rain. That's pretty cool stuff right there. Oh, and I'm not really going to talk too much about the Titanic Hydra that had us cornered in a cave that we were hiding in because we could feel the ground shaking with every step that it took, and that we barely survived the encounter with. Oh, did we ever defeat the Hydra? Hell no, because I decided it was a Titanic Hydra, and you have 6 of those heads coming at you at once. Your puny mortal ass ain't going to hold up to it. But we had a good time. It was hardcore. Now, if you want to get a copy of your own, there's plenty of them out there from old printings that you can get a physical copy. You can get it off DriveThruRPG if you endorse giving a company that decries the moral failings of the people who made the game anything anybody wanted to play. And so I'd encourage you not to buy it from DriveThruRPG, because you don't want to put Wizards of the Coast or Hasbro in the moral hazard of having to accept effectively blood money from their perspective. Help them stay morally pure. But there is an archive where you could find a copy of it. Perhaps you look around online for a PDF, you'll be able to find it. And the Goodman Games edition I mentioned, unfortunately, looking at their website, I can't tell that they still sell it. And that is a problem with licensed products, because they were given permission by Wizards of the Coast to make this and the other original Adventures Reincarnated. And I think that deal may be over. And as I mentioned, these Goodman Game Original Adventures Reincarnated are some quality products, and so finding a physical copy of that for cheap, ooh, good luck. It wasn't cheap when it came out, and it hasn't gone down in value. X1 was designed to teach DMs how to run wilderness adventures and hex crawls, and it worked with me. It still gets mad love to this day because it's a fun module, it achieves its teaching goal, and is endlessly customizable. Want to make it more Lost World King Kong pulpy? You've got the material to work with. Want to make it more Lovecraftian with alien antediluvian civilizations? You've got the building blocks already in place. It doesn't hold hands as much as B2 did, but that's out of the expectation that the DM has learned the basics and is now ready to level up their skills. Turns out when you invest in developing people who want to improve their skills, they appreciate it and everyone is better off for it. That helps build the DM toolkit that 5e doesn't bother with, since it focuses just on the sugar high of quick player power progression and gimme dats, and then gets boring real quick. If you disagree with that opinion, 5e designer Mike Merles said effectively that in an interview with Professor Dungeon Master. I'm not making it up. The designer of the game said that's a problem. Also, Merles appears to not understand that all the problems he brought up in the interview with the game he designed are his fault, showing he's a bad game designer. Now, I'm a believer that mistakes can be incredibly good teachers, so I would encourage you watch that interview so you can see that Tard own himself, and so that maybe, just maybe, we ourselves can avoid being that incompetent. As mentioned, this remains one of the most talked about modules ever made, and I want to offer 3 other reviews from DMs I respect: Seth Skorkowski, Captain Courageous, and Mystara's greatest champion, Mr. Welch. They each focus on different aspects of the module and what draws them in about it. However, Seth gets really hung up about the internal logic of the adventure, and while he's not wrong, bro, calm down. It's a pulp fantasy island full of dinosaurs, dragons, zombies, and lost civilizations. It's okay if it doesn't make complete sense. Indeed, Moldvay and Cook gave you plenty of room to have it make sense in the way you want it to. So have at it. What's your take on the Isle of Dread? Have you played it or ran it before, and how did that go? I'd love to hear about it, so please drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed yourself, I do enjoy it when people like and subscribe, so be sure to do that. And I thank you for your time, and that you chose to spend it with me in Isle of Dread, as we dear friends part for now. I wish you nothing but the best.